Hey guys, Connor Richards of PokerNews here with Life Outside Poker. My guest for this episode is Brad Booth, one of the most memorable high stakes cash players from the poker boom, who you may remember from his famous bluff against Phil Ivey. Brad was also a victim of the ultimate bet cheating scandal, and his life took a downward spiral from there as he disappeared from the poker world for several years with various poker debts. Now Brad is returning to the poker world and says he wants to make things right with those he owes money to. Let's get into it. Brad, thank you so much for being here today for this interview. I'm super excited to talk to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
You're a very familiar face to especially older poker fans from like the poker boom era when poker was really thriving. You were one of the most memorable faces out there. You, of course, had that epic bluff against Phil Ivey on high stakes poker, probably to this day the most famous, one of the most famous televised bluffs. And, lots of crazy stories of living at Bellagio, having swings for Ferraris on a daily basis. And things kind of came crashing down, of course, when you were cheated on Ultimate Bet for several $1 million, and things kind of took a turn from there. It's been a while since we've heard from you in the poker community, and now you're back. It looks like you're turning your life around. There's so much for us to talk about, so that's great. But I do just want to start off. Let's go back to the beginning. Growing up in Canada, from what I've heard, you were obsessed with poker even from a very young age. So let's start then. How did you discover poker?
Okay, that's quite some time ago. I guess that's like 40 years ago now. But I think essentially from my grandpa, who was a barber, who when he had no clients would give me the deck of cards and chips and sort of play a five card draw, two draws of two by myself. So I had to envision that there was other people there and so I kind of fell in love with cards at a very early age. And then we used to also scramble hockey cards and things, so that kind of got my gambling aspect to it as well. But and then my mom had seven sisters, and they would always come over and play rummy and things like that. And so I always had sort of cards around me as a kid. And then made the wrong choice at 15 to quit school and try and play poker. And that was that's like 34 years ago now. So
And so you started playing in the Canadian scene. You got the nickname Yukon Brad. I think that you said for a while, for 14 years, you were playing poker every day. So
yeah.
it sounds like you were just absolutely obsessed with it.
I was obsessed was probably the word. Know your limits, stay within it. It was probably a wee bit unhealthy as far as the amount of hours and time I put into it when I should have been potentially gaining other life experiences. But I was just drawn to cards, and that's kind of how it all started.
What was the poker scene like there in Canada? How close was it to your closest casinos? Where were the main spots you would play? All that.
Well, the casinos are the places I played were about an hour away, so I would have to hitchhike in, and then if I had a little score, I would take a bus back. Yeah, that was a long time ago, but that's the kind of way it was. Like I didn't have a car, I wasn't old enough to drive, and I didn't want to spend any of my Little Caesars bankroll to drive into the city or get a ride into the city. So I would hitchhike into the city, and then if I scored, I would take a bus back and try and be back for work or hockey the next day and things like that. So, but that was a long time ago. That was literally like 30 plus years ago.
So how did you make that transition from those Canadian games to then the height of the poker boom? You're in Las Vegas playing in Bobby's room, which of course everybody knows is the spot for high stakes cash games, and you're probably battling against a lot of the best players or most well-known players. How'd you make that transition?
Well, I guess I started off playing live, like I said, and spent a lot of time in Calgary, Alberta. And then I might have been a little bit before that, but I guess I was introduced to a site called Planet Poker, which was the very first poker site ever, to my understanding, out there. And it was done by Mike Caro. And, I could have been one of the first 50 people ever online. And then Paradise Poker came in and then some other sites. But I would just sort of travel around and do my own little grind. Just fell in love with the game very early.
And so I think it is true. One of the, things I've read is there was a period where you were actually living at Bellagio and playing there every day.
Yeah, living at the Bellagio, I don't think you're allowed to spend usually more than 28 days or so in there, but I found a way to have a minor loophole where I was there for about a year and a half, and that's all I did, and I think there was one stretch where I went outside, I don't know, maybe just a few times in like 3, 4 months kind of thing. It had everything. I didn't need to go anywhere. It's not like I needed to go out grocery shopping or anything like that. It was you know, the poker room was in the basement. So it was there was no reason to leave.
And living in a suite at a luxury hotel in Las Vegas and going downstairs to play poker every day, that's pretty much the poker dream right there. When you look back on it, was it as glamorous as, maybe up and coming grinders would daydream it being, or, was it kind of too expensive and not really feeling like you had a home or any of that?
Well, it certainly didn't feel like I had a home, but I was kind of okay with that part. The luxuries kind of went up. I started off in just a regular room and then, upwards, and then had some pretty very strong connections that allowed me to, be in a villa for a while and some, nicer rooms and things like that. Um, but I don't know. I just wanted to play poker. All the extra luxuries and stuff were great, but it didn't really, I don't think I was too pretentious about the other things. I just was happy that I could be uh, playing in a blue chip, red chip game, or whatever color the smaller denominations are, to playing like you said in Bobby's room and stuff. So I was just rising this way, but not really too worried about if there was a limo outside for me or not. So it was fantastic to be able to just hone my skills in the live arena at the Bellagio on a regular basis.
And what sort of stakes were those? And talk about some of the swings you experienced, because the famous line that everyone remembers is you saying, up and down a Ferrari. So talk about those
Yeah,
swings.
up a Ferrari, down a Ferrari. Yeah, that was a real thing. We used to. I mean, I nowadays it's a little bit more normal, but back then there was just the dinosaurs of poker. Chip Reese and Doyle and Ellie and Chow Jang and all the boys. But for a new person, that was kind of that wasn't too normal. So yeah, so that's the up and down Ferrari part. The I think my most it all started with this, to be honest, is that when I first went down there, I think it was in 1998, and they didn't have any no limit. So I would speak to the poker room director there when I first got in. I said, "Hey, is there any no limit?" He's like, "No, we don't do that here." So I'm like, "Okay, well, that's absurd. I've been playing that since I was 5." So I went to the Mirage, and they didn't have any of that either. So back in the day, you used to have to get them to sign a little piece of actual paper that said, Brad checked in at this time and he cashed out at this time in order to get a poker room rate. And after 3 weeks of time, and I'd been into the office once or twice trying to get a live no limit game going, they just, would just say, no, we don't do that. Anyways, after about 3 weeks, I finally went in there and Mr. Dalton had said, "Hey, Brad, let me make a phone call for you and see what I can do." And I said, okay, because I was really trying to get no limit going. And he either called the NGC, which is the Nevada Gaming Commission, or he called somebody within the business to see if he can get it approved. Anyways, he came back into the office after he had actually no, he was in the office. He told me to get out for a few minutes, but then he said, "Okay, Brad, here's the deal, and I don't want to hear any contest about it or anything, but you can play 1-2 no limit. The maximum buy-in is 100. The minimum buy is 100." And at that moment, I knew I was kind of creating history with starting the first no limit game outside of Bobby's room. So I took seat one and played for 3 days straight, and then came back to the Bellagio, I think 2 or 3 years later. I think after Moneymaker had won at that point, so maybe 4 years later. And now poker was thriving as far as the no limit stuff goes. So that was sort of one of my prouder moments as far as uh, that goes. But so to answer your question, I guess I started off at 1-2 no limit there. Um, and then when I went back, I instantly hopped into the 10-20 and then progressed up to whatever it was, 300, 600 or 500, 1,000. or 200, 400, somewhere in that range. So yeah, I hope I answered that question, but it all started something like that.
That's great background. So how about the high stakes poker appearance? How did that come together? How'd you get that invite?
How did I get the first? That was on season two. I believe Mattisel called me, or I had mentioned to Mattisel that, hey, I would love to sort of be on one of those shows or something like that. And Mike gave me a call and just said, hey, Brad, I'm here. There might be a seat open. Would you want to play if we could get you a seat or something like that? And I believe he talked to Maury, or I can't think of the name right now, but the person previous to actually started it all. Um, and they gave me the okay and said, come on down. And I think for that one, we did it at either the Golden Nugget. I think that one was the Golden Nugget. And then the Ivy Hand was in season three. And that was at South Point, if I remember right. So that's how I got it. I got the invite from Mike Mattisell originally.
Yeah, I was actually down playing at South Point just yesterday because I was watching that famous Ivy hand and it was just cool to see that happening. Where in South Point did that take place? Is that like in a hotel room or a
No, I think it was in a convention room because it's such a big setup and stuff. They got the semis and all the whatever stuff goes into filming, the cameras and all the wires and everything like that, the lighting and stuff. I believe it was in a convention room as where they built the set. Or
Oh, okay.
maybe that was Poker After Dark. It's a bit of a blur, but I do think that's how we filmed high stakes poker. I could ask David Williams or somebody who probably has a better memory than I do.
Yeah, that's right. David Williams was in these games. I know when you bluffed Ivy, there was like Antonio Esfandiari, David Benjamin.
Oh yeah, that's right too. Yeah.
A lot of big players. So let's talk about this hand. I'm sure most people have seen it, but we'll kind of walk through it just for anyone who hasn't. You're playing, it looks like very deep stack cash, and you open up with four deuce suited. Ivy has pocket kings, and he three bets you. You decide to call there. Maybe let's just start there. Talk about the
Sure.
open and then deciding to call.
Sure. Ivy might have actually four betted. I think Williams actually opened, and I think I three bet David to isolate, and then Ivy had a real hand. And so at that point, sort of, if that's the way the hand went, maybe David didn't raise pre. But anyways, so at that moment, I put Ivy on aces or kings, and for me, it just felt like kings. It just truly, on my soul, felt like he had kings. And then we were deep enough. I think he had 300 or so in front of him, and I had him covered at that point. And so I decided to see a flop. But I also knew I was kind of there to make history or just do something kind of special. It was kind of like my moment that I knew I was going to do something one way or another. So, anyways, I decided to call, and the flop came out 3-6-7, one spade, and I just kind of figured I know if my read was right, if he had aces or kings, that he wouldn't be able to call if I shipped in that spot. Any player would most likely just find a better spot. Because who's going to be so crazy and absurd to put in 300,000 without a hand, right? My only thought was when David Benjamin was, he was kind of using Ivy as a block for me, which was kind of nice. He decided to sit back, and then I was like, oh shit, I'm like a deer in headlight right now. And when I do watch that video, I can see myself clicking chips, and I was very nervous. And I was more nervous because I thought Ivy might just for a second put me on queens. And I knew if he did that, then I was in real big trouble. Um, so I just sort of used it as leverage for if I was Ivy, what would I do in this spot? I'd probably just fold and find a better spot. Even if I am folding the best hand, I'll find a better spot, right? Those marginal hands. So that's what I did. And it's sort of one of those things to this day. I still, it gets talked about when I go out to the card rooms or whichever. It's just a thing, I guess. I'm the person who lived it, but it's still something that's talked about all the time. And now my response is don't bluff Ivy or you'll end up like me, so it's I know it's a historic hand, but I treat it as a bit of a joke and stuff now. So
Poker's changed a lot since then. Do you think this is the type of play that would get through in today's day and age?
Well, probably not. The one other leverage thing that I used for me was that, with Ivy knowing that he was the best or one of the best poker players, it's you don't really want to end up calling off your chips and like making a bad call, right? So I knew I kind of had that leverage to get him to fold that hand, but I also put in cash instead of chips, knowing that Ivy also might think, man, when people put in cash, they usually have it. Because back in those days, we would, throw somebody two flags to get 10,000 cash and sort of try to accumulate cash. So like the pros or the whatever it was were always trying to like get cash, and it was just one extra level that I felt I could use to get him to fold in that spot. But it was also three stacks of high society, just like in rounders. So I knew that part was like kind of my moment in that regard. But as far as poker, how much it's changed, would that get through now? Probably not, not if probably not. A person would probably just it's close. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I do think a lot of people do fold in that spot. At the end of the day, it's one hand. Or I mean it's just one pair, so I could have easily have flopped a 3, 6, or 7 for a set. I guess I could have had the 8, 9 of diamonds or something, which gives me open-ended and diamond draw. But uh Ivy thought I had aces, because I went back to the Bellagio afterwards, and Greenstein said to me, hey, I just got off the phone with Ivy. I was talking to him, and before he even finished the story, I told him that Phil, you should have called, because Barry and I had played quite a bit, but Phil and I hadn't. So he didn't really know what to do with me in that situation. I think Phil actually thought I was a businessman of some sort. And for some reason he mentioned, and maybe I got this wrong, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but he had mentioned, I believe, to Barry that he had thought I had aces, which, looking back on it now, doesn't quite make sense, because I'd probably re-raise pre once he raised with his kings. So yeah.
Would you say that this play was representative of your style back then? Were you the guy who would put people to the test, and was that kind of
Yeah.
where you found your edge?
Yeah, by all means, it was just sort of putting them on a hand, and trying to exploit the fact that most times you can't call on that. Nowadays when I play and I produce a hand, a lot of times people always think I'm bluffing, and I'm just like, hey, I'm too broke to bluff. So if I'm getting the chips in the middle, I got it. So yeah, it's yeah.
And
So yeah, pardon me.
so you said that people still talk about this hand to the day when you go out this day when you go out to card rooms and stuff. Are there any other memorable hands that stand out from those televised appearances?
Yeah, I think the one where I made a straight flush against Negrano, and Jennifer Harmon decided to pipe up and say, I had the 9 of diamonds. And I'm like, I had the 9 of diamonds in my hand, right? Because I had the straight flush, the 8, 9, 10, Jack, Queen. And I just looked over at her and said, well, I guess you caught me in a lie then, even though I had it. But it was just, that was one of my moments that I appreciated. But as far as some of the other stuff, I mean, I don't watch a whole bunch of it, but I don't think there's anything else too memorable, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe when I got in with Ace Jack versus Patrick's Jack 3 on a Jack Jack board and lost the hand in to get second place in Poker After Dark, but I think none come to my mind. Certainly none trump that hand. So
It was definitely a very memorable one, and one that I'm glad that I got the chance to ask you about. So let's go ahead and transition a bit. You mentioned Planet Poker, I think was the site that you mentioned, and that's a good segue into talking about online poker, which, from the sounds of things, this is kind of where things took a downward turn. So I don't know, before we get into the ultimate bet stuff, talk about playing online, what stakes you were playing, and kind of where things went wrong.
well, where things went wrong were a little bit tricky because I sort of feast or famine as far as like not protecting my bankroll at an early age in one sense. So I can't blame my mistakes on online or anything like that myself. But I started off small in one sense, even though when I was 20 years old, I was playing 10-20 with the straddle pot limit Omaha. So I'd played, at a very young age, PLO, and managed to make a really good living from Calgary, Alberta, back in those days, which then transitioned to be able to, essentially be able to, for me to afford playing online. And so, I started off relatively small. There wasn't a whole lot of big no limit back then. It started off as limit only. Even online was limit only. And then once they started introducing no limit and stuff, me and Prahlad and Matisal used to, battle really hard online. And, there was good days of rising and fall and all that kind of stuff. But so, yeah, I originally started off quite small, kind of. I
Still
play small.
sounds
Yeah.
still sounds pretty big, by today's standards. But so you're playing online. I know you had a full tilt sponsorship and all that. Um, and then you're playing on Ultimate Bet. Of course, it comes out later that there was a cheating ring where basically Russ Hamilton and maybe some other executives had a God mode feature where they were able to see players' whole cards and cheat them out of millions of dollars. Like I said, this didn't come out until later. So at the time, did you just think you were running bad or, had been cursed or what was going through your
Well,
head?
I certainly thought I'd been cursed, and the amount of laptops and stuff that I went through, because I thought I was cursed or my account was cursed. So I'd be changing screen names and stuff like that back in the day when uh, changing your screen name was just part of the norm. That took a transition later on where you don't do those type of things. But yeah, I'd always change my screen name or throw out a laptop, and I still don't know what happened to this day. And, it's a thing that I've decided just to put in the past and not put any more of my energy into it, because it just sort of, made me mentally, go through it mentally. It was very tough times, but, yeah, I'm sorry. What was the question there? Sorry. I kind of,
No, that's great. It it must have been really difficult. Again, you mentioned to this day you still don't really know what happened because especially in a game like poker where you can be results oriented, you've got to be second guessing yourself or like you
sure.
said, thinking it's your laptop and so kind of driving yourself crazy, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I did. That's a good way to put it. I drove myself crazy, and for a few years, I hadn't known. So I managed to make a lot of mistakes in between then. Just wondering like if I was having a brain aneurysm or what, because all of a sudden I couldn't play poker when for quite some time I was crushing it. And so it was a tough thing. But sometimes in life you just have to go through things, and if that's what I had to go through, then that's that.
It definitely sounds like tough times. And so as part of this, you were getting backing or taking out loans from other players. And so a kind of infamous one that happened in 2012 is Doug Polk, who I don't know how big of a poker player he was now, but now he's, a YouTuber and well known in the community. But he lent you some money, and then it's documented on 2+2 that you had kind of ghosted him. And so I want to talk about that. And yeah, how did that come to be?
Come to be was, I was a mistake I'd made, because at that point I'd actually kind of decided to put online to the side, because I was winning at live and losing everything online. Probably due to my own mentality at that point. I wasn't being cheated or anything like that. I just, for whatever reason, maybe when I sat online, I just felt like I was already at a deficit, because even when I lost hands, I thought I was maybe being taken advantage of. But no, Doug was, nice enough to allow his friend to um, give me online chips for cash, and I just got rocked every single day, losing the 30K or whatever it was, or maybe it was more than that. Actually, it was probably like 60 or 70K. I think I gave him 30 or 40,000, and then didn't have enough money to pay off the rest. But um, I ended up just sort of going back to online and just getting pounded on and losing. um, to a point where I remember I had the money when I borrowed the money. I had the money, but after I dusted it all off, I still owed him that 30K or whatever it was, and it was in my safe. And I decided to go out and drink pretty hard because I couldn't believe I had just lost all my money online when I just regrinded it back up playing live. So one sec. So, anyways, yeah, I woke up the next morning with no passport, and um, I'd borrowed some more money that night and lost it all being a degenerate, and I had to own up to Doug that I had screwed up, even though at first I didn't own up. I kind of gave him the runaround, and until finally the runaround just I had nowhere to run, so I just had to say, hey Doug, I screwed up. And he was a real gentleman. He said, hey, like, as much as I'd love to lay into you right now because this was ridiculous. Shit happens, let's go on a payment plan. And that was very respectful of him, and I have to always appreciate him for the initial aspect of that. Um, and then he'd given me 30 days. Because I said I had to go back up to Canada at that point. I didn't know what to do. I just like lost everything, and so I went back up to Canada, and I was trying to figure everything out. Doug was trying to reach me, but my American cell was no longer, and I was on my Canadian cell. And it doesn't matter what day it was, but a little bit before the 30 days, he had decided to write that post and things like that. And I have to just live with that. And so that's just the way it is. And now all I could do is try to make right still, and I plan to do so.
Can you talk about how you plan to make it right? Have you talked to Doug about this, or kind of what's the next step?
Well, I think the next step is just sort of making good faith payments. I mean, it's not like I'm playing in the big games anymore. So like shipping somebody, 5, 10, and 20K is just not a thing. Now it's like it's got to be a lot smaller. Like good faith payments come in, you know, double digit or 3 digit kind of numbers, just as a token of respect while I kind of get shit together. So
Yeah.
that's sort of
Uh,
the way it is. But yeah, I've spoken to him a few times throughout the years and things, and um, I just have to continue to try to make right. There was quite a gap, or there was quite for some time I was making right, but I was playing in the bigger games and stuff like that. And when you're trying to start off from ground zero again, it just makes it makes it a lot tougher. So all I have to do now with the people who I owe, because Doug's not the only one, is try my best to stay in communication. For anybody out there who needs to get in contact with me, you can contact me at contactbradbooth@gmail.com, and we can have a conversation. And all I can do is be open and transparent, and learn from my past mistakes.
it's great to hear that you're making amends on that. And you mentioned there was that gap there. This incident we talked about was in 2012, so more than a decade ago. Uh, Talk about what was going on in the 2010s. Were you playing poker in those days, or what was going on?
In the 2010s, you mean like after 2012 kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, maybe between
Well,
2012 to like yeah, 2020 or more
well,
recently.
it's a little bit of a blur. I do know in 2012, approximately, I was playing in Bobby's and Ivy's room and making a little bit of headway there, and but that didn't work out too well. And then I think somewhere along those lines, I just ended up being kind of a sicko degenerate again. And I think I moved to Arizona and played there, and then I moved back to I was in California for a bit, and then up in Tahoe, and now I'm on just the Columbia River, which is in between Oregon and Washington. But as far as some of the other teams, I was just trying to play catch up at those points. It was very humbling and very tricky to go from flags and cranberries and all those type of things down to a blue chip, red chip, green chip, occasional black chip kind of game. But I sort of was just going in and out of all those kind of things while being a sicko, and that's the part I'm ashamed of most, is that like my sickness got the best of me. So, like it was just bad. It was just bad. I got caught up in all of it, and you know, all I can all I can try and do is make right now. So,
You had mentioned the with the money Doug Polk gave you, that alcohol was a factor in that, and you'd gone out drinking. Was drinking an issue for you back then?
I think so. I think just because it was always excessive, it wasn't like having a social cocktail of having like one or two, kind of like putting a cap on it on three. It was like, that's where we're going the distance, and we would just like, tilt them back all night until just like idiotic behavior occurred on the reg. And now I can proudly have a cocktail or two, and that's it. I don't drink to get drunk ever anymore, and I feel like I have that completely under control. It's not an issue in that regard for me anymore, because I know my limit and I stay within it. So, but I think it's important for me, who likes to be social, uh, to know that I used to have a major issue with it, but I feel comfortable knowing that I can have a glass or two of wine, and that's that.
Yeah.
So,
So one other incident that I wanted to ask about was it was kind of scary back in 2020. There were stories about you going missing. People in the poker community didn't really know what was going on. We were worried, did he go in the woods and we're never going to see him again? So talk about kind of what happened there.
well, I think, with the things that we've like talked about now, I think all roads led up to that. It was just sort of like, uh my sometimes in life you just have to take a time out. You can't you know I was unintentionally hurting too many people. I was just trying to borrow money all the time, and uh my integrity was not in check. I was just trying to find a way to like go gambling and stuff like that, rather than have enough discipline just to play cards and things like that. And I think all roads just sort of led to the fact that, like, man, I am doing things that are just like a real shitty person. And so I needed to take a personal time out, and you know check myself, do some growing up and some reflection, and just stop being a kid. Through all those years I was just going 100 miles an hour until I was, call it 45. And I feel like I feel like I'm an adult now, and it's just one of those tough things that I just had to check myself out before I just was past the point of any return.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So reading about that incident, I did see a comment. It looked like it was from your roommate at the time, who said that he had lent you his car, and then I think he's the one who actually reported you missing. Uh, so can you talk about, what's going on there, and have you been in contact with this
sure,
roommate? Are you going to make amends
sure.
with that?
I certainly tried to make amends with that, but due to my past behaviors, you know, uh, it may have come across just as another bullshit lie. So the only thing I can do is let time prove itself, as far as like where my integrity lies and how genuinely bad I do feel about my behavior in the past. So with that situation, I just have to probably eat that and realize that there's a lot of distaste from their side, and I have to accept that.
Yeah. So when did you kind of have the turning point where you're like, I want to make amends on this stuff. I want to break this cycle. When was the kind of breaking point?
Well, when I decided to go MIA, I had a whole lot of time in the woods to to reevaluate my past behaviors, and a lot of them derived from a sickness. Um, so I guess just laying in bed throughout the day, throughout the night, reevaluating, playing back my life hand history. Um, I just sort of had to say, you know, what did I become? You know, you know. I guess it's like this, Connor. One sec. I hate being like this. One sec. Um, yeah, I just did a lot of self-reflecting, going, realizing that my heart uh, just didn't match my actions. So, you know, got to wake up. You get one life.
Well, talking to you now, it looks like you're doing a lot better. You mentioned that you're living up there in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. What is your day-to-day looking like right now? Are you playing in local card rooms or
Yeah, I'm playing in local card rooms here in Oregon. It's been great. The people who I've encountered have been very kind and warming, which has been fantastic. There's a place called The Game here that's ran by a guy named Bronco. He's great, him and his staff. There's another place called Portland Meadows, and then there's also places in Medford and Grants Pass, which are Southern Oregon card rooms. And it's been great, as far as that goes, and also in Bend, Oregon. And I've just been sort of doing my own little rounder thing on trying to get back out there. Quite a few years there while I was in the woods, I didn't play any billiards, I didn't play any poker, and you know I wasn't about to become a hermit and be in the woods forever. So I had to delicately reappear and um, do my best to be a man rather than a kid. So I've tried doing that, and I've come a long way. I was in real rough shape there for quite some time.
yeah. And what sort of stakes are you playing these days? And it's obviously surely a huge transition from the days of playing in Bobby's room, but do you have aspirations to get back up to the high stakes?
Yes, I would love to get back into the high stakes again. Whether that happens or not, I'm not too sure. It's not my main drive like it was in the past. My main drive is to make people whole who helped me throughout those years. So that's my main focus. But yes, I do hope to get back into the arena of high stakes. But as far as what I'm playing now, I have no ego. I've been humbled, and whether I'm playing 1-2 with a bring in a five, or 5-5, or 5-5 with a $10 straddle, is where I'm at now, and that's just the way it is. And I'm thankful and grateful to be doing that.
I know you're more of a cash game player. Are we going to see you at the World Series of Poker or anything like that?
Well, I would love to. The World Series was never my my main thing. I was always a cash game player. Whether I followed the circuit and played the cash games while all the tournament players came in. But I do plan, if able, to play some more tournaments than I had in the past. I'm not too sure what my ROI was back in those days. I know it's a lot tougher nowadays with all the kid geniuses and things, but I'd like to try poker again without my past degeneracies as a kid. I'd like to try poker again as an adult. So I'll see. As far as the poker tournaments go, I wouldn't mind playing some of those. I know there's a WPT event coming up in Thunder Valley in the middle of March. That's an option. I would love to get down to the World Series and play all those events. I know the main event is an endurance run, Mr. Helmuth, but it is a thing I would love to do. On that note, I think it would be a shame if Phil didn't play You know, I hope he has a change of heart. It's an endurance run, but I know that if there was a Chinese game or something like that, and it was 12 hours a day, I'm sure, us old guys could muster up the energy to sit there and play Chinese all day. So I'm sure we could do it playing Hold'em and things like that. But maybe the rules do need to be looked at. I'm not sure, but it would be a shame if he didn't show up.
Yeah, that's been a huge story since he said he wasn't going to play that, but hopefully we see both you and Phil in there. That would be fun.
Agreed.
Well, I just have a few general questions that I like asking guests as we wrap up here. So one of them is I like asking for a book recommendation from guests, and I'm wondering, especially with your recent transformation, is there a specific either book or I don't know, philosophy or movie that kind of got you through those hard times?
Well, no movie. Have never really been a person to watch too many movies. Books, I've never really read too many books. I know the Bible is
Okay.
probably the best book. But as far as you know, movies or books or anything like that, I wouldn't know where to start on that.
How about a person? Is there anybody who, maybe a family member or someone who
Well, definitely, as far as that goes, my grandma has been wonderful. I was down and out in the woods, so there was a few people that helped me out there, but Newt and Marie were there for me, and allowed me to uh, essentially, I mean, they opened up their door for me after once they realized that I was trying and making improvements to my life and stuff. They allowed me to get back on my feet, but I was helping them out doing a bunch of wood stuff. And I've never really had a job and things in my life as far as outside of poker, but I was cutting down trees and limbs and bucking up firewood and learning how to use a skid steer and cutting the lawn, wiping the counters, whatever, stuff that I hadn't really ever done before. But Newt and Marie were amazing. My friend Leo was fantastic. I can go on, but those would be some names for sure.
that's great. And so another question I'd like to ask is a piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self. Let's maybe go back to those poker boom days and looking kind of, at the height there. What, if you could talk to yourself then, what would you tell him?
Well, definitely know your limit and stay within it. So, essentially protect your bankroll and things like that. Um, and make sure again, know your limits, stay within it, falls into if you are going to go out and have a good time, make sure that it's within reason and not some just wing nut going 100 miles an hour. And reach out to the ones that you care about uh, more often than you think. Something like that is probably what I would tell my younger self. you know
That's great. And going along with knowing your limit, I like to ask about guess what their favorite life lesson is from poker because, the game is such a metaphor for other aspects of life. So, is there a favorite life lesson that you think people can take from poker?
uh maybe capital allocation. I mean, once you do have some disposable income and stuff, maybe fire on something outside of poker. All I did was just play in bigger games, so maybe, diversify somewhat, make some good moves that way. For instance, like what Doug did, like what a fantastic thing he did. He created a poker room and, it's great, so probably something like that.
That's great advice. Well, Brad, it's been really great talking to you, and I appreciate you speaking candidly about, the highs and lows in your life. And it's good to see that you're in a good spot and want to make amends, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you reaching out and thank you for the interview. And I look forward to seeing you again in person, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully at the WSOP this summer.
My man.
That's awesome.